Hello, I'm Alex Hagan. We're analyzing the media and its role in Libya in particular recently. This particular week, around August 4th, we call it the turning of the tide. So the last portion of our analysis was calling a period that was sort of a height, which is like the Battle of Libya, similar to the Battle of Britain in some respects, by a mass bombing campaign to break the morale of the population's alliance to the government, let's say. And it's quite an ironic thing that Britain would engage in a terror air campaign after what happened to London. So at any rate, in this period, the Libyans managed not to break against the Europeans' oceanic onslaught. The fortress withstood the onslaught, whether you like Gaddafi or not. So there's been a turning of the tide, though, because the New York Times was my #1 offender on my media inaccuracy list compared to the size and role, other than The Guardian, which was the main traitor, which was that they betrayed their journalistic integrity by lining up with a side without more thoroughly evaluating the situation. Now, the New York Times had a very craven article called The Libya Campaign, where they basically said we should do it because if we don't, we're going to look bad and Gaddafi might get back at us. For me, it was the lowest of the low. It also, of course, included suggesting that we steal their sovereign investments and transfer them to an insurgency, which is really going to do a lot for investor confidence in the Western capital markets after this is all done by developing nations, which will be where all the money is going to be going because of our resource valuation right now, where raw materials are becoming so critical in the power game again. So at any rate, let's continue. The LA Times is still towing the line. The Younnes Assassination is still causing fallout. Gaddafi's, the CNN continues to be the best in coverage, with Ivan Watson being one of the 3 people, and Mackenzie was one of the others that really called into question the party line, the establishment Washington line, that there's really very little support for Gaddafi. Now, again, we can concede to the government some sincerity in trying to stop a complete defeat of the opposition, which many of us assumed was democratic in Benghazi, through the no-fly zone, but no one expected them to turn it into the most violent peacekeeping mission in human history that I know of. And with such dual conflict of interest roles, which I've spoken of earlier. But there is a question. Now, the Gaddafi son, Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi, the principal political leader, and the children, has said that he's been working on a deal with what we would call their right wing, which is their conservative religious people, who are affiliated with jihadists, because jihadism isn't always a pejorative amongst decent people, because there are cases where people legitimately want to struggle for their self-determination, and we had our Yankee revolutionaries, and some of their jihadists are legitimate. Many, of course, have been driven to attacks on civilians, which is repugnant. Gaddafi's, so the question is, will this short the local population morale psychologically, or would they be better off being a little bit less aggressive so they get more sympathy? Because the real pressure needs to come from within the West, although obviously they have to, if they feel they wish to defend their government and way of life, not take anything for granted and be prepared to resist by themselves. And so This is also a case of the Ron Paul case where he's exacerbatingly consistent versus Barack Obama, who seems over flexible. The Gaddafis have traditionally, the Jamahiriya does not traditionally embrace radical Islam. I don't believe so. I don't believe it embraces terrorism as a part of its philosophy of targeting civilians. So at any rate, so he's doing an enfilade right. My concern for us Western folk, in particular, not that I have any less concern for other people, but I have more influence over us Western folk, is that the media failure has been the principal cause of our bungling on the mission. And to give you an idea of what the media should have released a long time ago, I prepared this ages ago. I will not bore you, but very briefly, these were the kind of things that I went over to figure all this out. So this is the U.S. public sector. Defense Department is 16%. When you add it up with the entire criminal justice system and the interest on the debt from the war, look at that. All that blue stuff. I'm trying to highlight it so you can see. There we go. All that stuff is a military-industrial complex. And look at how much of our federal budget that consumes. And look at poor little education on this little orange slice of cheese. That's a total public sector. That is not simply federal. Okay, so private sector payroll is only 3.6 trillion. So the defense and criminal justice system, which is driven by poverty, because drug abuse is much higher in terms of people getting arrested for it. People can manage their addictions without getting arrested, who are middle class and upper class. Lower class people get in trouble with the law. So it costs us money for them to, and we would as libertarians prefer that people eventually deal with that problem, and we assume they're just impaired somewhat, but they may still be more value addition oriented than other people if they're actually doing something creating value rather than it's speculative or parasitic. So at any rate, with that all said, we have 3.5 billion private payroll, 2.2 trillion in defense and corrections. So it's a ratio of 1.6 to 1. So it's dreadful. It's well, no, not quite. Yes, something like that. At any rate, so there's a 60% weight on our private sector wages just from defense and corrections. Looking at other factors, here's a narrative that we've described, which is, first of all, that you have every time we don't declare war, this same pattern emerges, which is we weren't planning this; it just happened. The pretext, then self-justification, where the media follows the warfare party line and does not look too carefully into the other side. And then the third is to justify our violent behavior by demonizing the enemy. And then fourth, to create a mythology about ourselves, American exceptionalism, that justifies our ability to impose our ideas on others. And the real reasons that we've unveiled about Libya is that we just simply dislike Gaddafi. By having his markets closed, there's no incentive for anyone to defend him in the business community. There's lots of people that might have interest in seeing him go for vendetta reasons and for when they kicked out the oil companies and to just get back pure self-interest. There's $1 trillion worth of oil left into the Libyan seas and sands. So then when we look at PISA scores, we see the United States is lagging. This is the scores for like 10th graders worldwide. Out of 30 countries tested, we were 17th in reading, 23rd in sciences, and last in math. And all that could be solved by simply realigning the education with the correctional defense systems, if nothing else. Now, getting back to the other factors, We will look at life expectancy, and we shall see that U.S. had an index that I created, which is just like an averaging of life expectancy with infant mortality. It's just a ratio of the two, a scoring, and there's no distortion of it. It's just a adding of the two relative scores amongst nations. And the U.S. scored a 135, Canada 142 for this area. And then if we look at, here's Cuba, they scored actually 1 point higher than the U.S. And in Africa, you see these countries, look at that, that's horrible. Negative numbers, I didn't even expect to get negative numbers. So we're looking at life expectancy of 48, infant mortality, life expectancy here in Eritrea 59.64, infant mortality rate is 4.8% of the babies, which is, horrible. 1 in every 20 babies would die by the time they got to 5. And then Libya, you see, has the highest rating in Africa. And you can look at income inequality stuff, you can look at educational metrics. Turns out Libya has more years average in school than the United States. And it has a lower poverty rate. Let's see if we can get over, well, let's look at prisoners. So here, the United States has 2 million prisoners, more than China, which has way, way more people than we do. And then down here, we got Libya, the supposed police state, which it was one of the least free societies, according to what I've been able to establish just from research. But Libya is way down here somewhere. Where is it? Okay, here we go. 9,600 prisoners. And it's also way lower per person. And look at this prisoner pie, United States, dark green, almost a quarter of all the prisoners in the world. It's just a shame. And let's see, I don't know what that is. This has to do with police statistics. Look at this incarceration rate map. The U.S. has way the highest at 715 per, and that doesn't even count the fact that we have all these ex-felons that still have partially restricted rights, which some people estimate to be as high as 20 million people, which would be like more than 10% of adult males for sure. And then you got Russia, and then Libya, completely moderate rate of incarceration. So nobody talks about this stuff. And then I have this UN index that shows an average, which is very favorable to Libya. So at any rate, with all that said, let's look briefly at the New York Times now. New York Times. So this article here, Major Libyan Rebel Shakeup, actually quotes, okay, here we go. This part, law enforcement officials in Benghazi said a committee formed to investigate the killing of General Younnes and 2 of his aides had already started its work. 3 prosecutors and 4 detectives will be responsible for sorting through a mystery that has exposed raw divisions in the rebel movement, raised fears about rebel score settling by militant Islamists, and distracted leadership struggling with battles on 3 fronts. I know the time is critical, Mr. Ben-Hur said, the justice coordinator for Benghazi. A spokesman for NATO said Thursday was looking at accusations planes had hit a civilian home, killing a mother and 2 children in an early morning airstrike on the town of Litan. The Gaddafi government bust 4 journalists to the sites and wounded the father, killing the mother, the 2 children hit by a bomb. And journalists saw an injured man who appeared to be the father. And 2 were uncovered to reveal the bloody bodies of 2 small children. Martyrs, martyrs for you.